Now, reply, Honorable Minister. Okay, it's okay.
Add 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah, please. No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir. Thank you to my distinguished senior colleague for giving me an opportunity to reply to all the honorable members that spoke. I was obviously making notes of everybody who has spoken. There are 25 people who have spoken, so I'm not going to go through the list. I'm conscious of the fact that I'm standing between you all and dinner, so I don't want to go through that list. But we had very distinguished colleagues, many of whom have been architects of India's economic policies over the last few years, who have spoken. I also had my good friend Derek who spoke, and I think Derek was trying to be a thorn in our side, but I hope he'll agree that I rose to the occasion. But in any case, I also want to commend the fact that we had two newcomers. We had two newcomers who gave maiden speeches, and since I'm a relative newcomer as well, I want to recognize them, and I want to commend them on the speeches that they gave today. As we begin the discussion about the appropriations bill, there's been some concern, which many of you also expressed, and which has been expressed in the media as well, that there is a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit together. There's a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit together. And so part of what I want to do today, and because many of you picked up some of these pieces and wanted to discuss them, is to try and put that puzzle together so that it's clear to all of us in this chamber, in this house, but also clear to people in the country how our policies fit together. And I think there are four very important pieces of the puzzle that we need to think about. The first important piece of the puzzle, of course, is the economic situation, and there are a number of people who spoke about that. I'll very briefly allude to it. The second very important piece of the puzzle also is, what is our economic philosophy? What is the framework of our thinking about economic policy, and how did that inform the budget and what we've been doing as far as economic policies are concerned? That's a very important piece of the puzzle as well. And when I get into it, I think that some of the honorable members will realize that if they have a disagreement with us, and if we have a disagreement with them, which was of course reflected in the hustings, then that disagreement is one of principle and philosophy. And so if they don't like our policies, so be it, because we come from very different points of the spectrum on those policies. So that's the second big piece of the puzzle. The third big piece of the puzzle is the policies that we have put in place in the budget and in some of our ideas and so on that we have also discussed. And then finally, what is happening on execution? And as far as execution is concerned, many people have spoken about execution as well. The fact is that execution, this is a budget, and obviously the execution happens downstream. So while it's interesting and important to speak about execution, the reality is the proof of the pudding will lie in the eating, and so we'll have to see how the year progresses to see whether the execution is up to the mark, and it should be, because we are obviously paying a lot of attention to that. So those who spoke and criticized us on execution, I would suggest to them, be patient, because we'll have to see what happens during this year. So those are the big pieces of the puzzle that we should be talking about today. Let's first talk about the first piece of the puzzle, which is, what is the economic situation that we are dealing with? Now, Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke at length about the policies of the UPA government, and the Honorable former Prime Minister is here, who is, of course, the architect of those policies. And we also know what the result of those policies were. And he spoke at length about the social sector spending and all that happened. And I'll just point to a couple of numbers which I think are very important, which I'll suggest that the House take notice of that, because it demonstrates part of what we had to deal with as we put our policies together, which is that, as Honorable Leader of the Opposition said, when the global economic crisis happened, a number of stimulative fiscal policies were put into effect. And those policies, as you know, in fact, this is in the budget at a glance number, set of numbers which you'll find, is that in 2008, 2009, the fiscal deficit went from 2.5%, which is what it was, to 6%, to 6.5%. Then in 2010, 2011, it was 4.8%, and then 5.8%. The stimulative policies that you put in place then resulted in a really, really high fiscal deficit, which was completely unsustainable. The whole world recognized it. And as a result of that, of course, inflation skyrocketed. We know that as well. And in fact, even more troubling, tax collection as a percent of GDP also dropped dramatically. And it was this set of economic conditions we inherited when we came into office in May 2004. We had a current account deficit that was out of control. The rupee had just gone to 68 to to the dollar in August, September 2013. We had current account, as I said, high current account deficit, high fiscal deficit. We had a situation where inflation had been running at 8 to 12% in a sticky and entrenched way. No, if I may, just let me finish and then you can come. If I may, let me just conclude. Let me just conclude this point and then you can speak. Therefore, and I'll just summarize 2 or 3 points. And this was the context within which we put the budget together. We therefore were in a situation where tax to GDP was running at 10%, roughly 10%, which is very low when you compare it to other major economies. Debt to GDP was over 60-65%, which is very high when you compare it to other emerging market countries or other developing countries. And the interest expense as a percent of tax of collection was 36%. So we had a situation where it was important because of high inflation, high fiscal deficit, that we pursue prudent monetary policies and also put in place the fiscal consolidation that was necessary. And that was the context, that was the backdrop to the budget. I will yield now.
So I would just like the record to be set straight. The current account deficit was less than 2% what you inherited. The fiscal deficit was also under control. In fact, the roadmap for fiscal deficit which was given is not being adhered to. That was our worry. And Finance Minister is aware that you have increased it by 1 year than what was meant to be the roadmap, which was set in motion during our time. There was a period of volatility of currencies in July, August 2013, that is true. But when we left office, it's also true that it was, the crude prices then were $115 per barrel, and it came down to 49, or now 59, 40, 58. That is the reality today. You have that huge comfort of savings. But at the same time, let me also say one thing to you. It's not a question of we and you. Anybody who understands the economic crisis, I'm sure you are an economist and the Finance Minister is here, that had become an imperative. And then you must also acknowledge that the interventions that were made helped the Indian economy to rebound very quickly, one of the fastest economies to rebound. Let me also put this to you, that during our time, if you say the policies, the GDP quadrupled. As an economist, you should know that that was unprecedented in 1 decade, the GDP going to $2 trillion. We inherited less than 500 billion. Let me also tell you that the foreign exchange reserves were 310 billion. And let me also now tell you that when we left, rupee was little over 62 to a dollar. This is a fact, you can check. And today it has crossed 65, that is also a fact.
No clarification. That's all. No
As I said earlier, Honorable
Outside.
Mr. Chairman, sir, as I said earlier, I'm standing between you all and dinner, so this is something that we should postpone for a separate discussion. It's a long discussion. A lot of people have opined on this. I'm not going to get into the details. I'll just make one clarifying point to the Honorable Member. He's a very learned, knowledgeable man, which I'm sure he'll appreciate. And that is a difference between stock and flow. What happens is when you have a fiscal deficit that's running at a very high level for a long period of time, you build up your debt to GDP. And when you build up your debt to GDP, that stock, which is what we inherited, we have to work down. We have to once again bring it down to a level that the trends, some of the trends were in place that you're saying, that is indeed correct. But in total, given the fact that we still had to put it right, we had to be able to be in a situation where we could in fact do the fiscal consolidation that was necessary, that you had brought up to those levels. Fiscal space was compressed, and that is important to realize. We also know, as far as the overall economic situation is concerned, that we have benefited from the global commodity cycle. It is indeed correct that oil prices have come down, which gave us the cushion to be able to get to a situation in this budget to really increase our spending on infrastructure and some other vitally important programs. So yes, we have of course benefited. The truth of the matter is, given the macroeconomic situation we had inherited, if we had not had the tailwinds, of a benign external environment, maybe it would have taken us not just 1 year, but maybe 2 or 3 years to correct the imbalances, the stock in the past. So we benefited. and that is to the benefit of everybody in the country. But we did inherit a situation that was dangerously unbalanced, and I think that all macroeconomists and all observers of the economy will agree. You may disagree, that is your choice, but that is indeed the situation. So that is the first piece of the puzzle, which is what was the economic situation that went into thinking about the budget, which required prudent monetary policy and continued fiscal consolidation, which is the point I wanted to make. Now let's talk about the economic philosophy. A lot of people have said that they have trouble understanding what the economic philosophy is, but I will say it very clearly and plainly and simply. And I would say that what I am saying is exactly what is in our party manifesto before the national elections, which was in the president's speech after we took office, which was in the first budget, which was in the president's speech thereafter, and which was reflected in this budget as well. So if you go through and you look at our economic thinking and what our overall economic objectives are, I think they've been very consistent through all these very important documents. And plainly said, here's what it is. What it is we are trying to build the productive capacity of India's economy. The productive capacity of India's economy. In that sense, it is in fact different from what I think the previous regime, my understanding of it, which I submit is my understanding, was more of a demand side view of the world and less of a supply side view of the world. I think our view is more of a supply side view where we want to build the productive capacity of the economy, which of course means that we are investing both in the hard assets that are required, the roads, the bridges, the highways, the ports, all of those that are required as far as the hard assets of the economy are concerned, as well as the soft assets that are required to power the economy forward. And the soft assets are, of course, the human capital. It's, of course, the health of our people. It is, of course, the skills that they have. As my colleagues and my honorable members spoke earlier, if you don't have the skills, you will not have the job. So obviously we understand that, and that's why we have a skill development ministry. So we're building the productive capacity of the Indian economy. That really is our overall goal, and we are sure that if we do it that way, if indeed we build the productive capacity of the Indian economy, what we will get, because we are also pursuing a balanced energy policy as well, that we will get the sustainable growth that we need, not a growth that outstrips our ecological carrying capacity, but the sustainable growth that we need to be able to power the economy forward in a non-inflationary way without the supply side bottlenecks that is required to be able to sustain growth through the cycle over a long period of time, over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. We talk about China. China over 3 decades has been able to grow at 9% a year because in fact they have pursued more of a supply side approach. So we definitely have to do that, and that in fact is the way we are thinking about it. That is the overall objective, because if we are not able to grow 7, as Honorable Finance Minister and Honorable Prime Minister have said many times, if we are not able to grow 7, 8 or 9 or 10% a year for the next decade or two, we will not be able to absorb the young people, the 1 crore people a year that are entering the workforce. So as Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Finance Minister have said many times, our number one priority is job creation, but that job creation is only going to happen if indeed we are able to ensure that the economy grows quickly and does not get into a boom-bust cycle if inflation again comes up. That's the overall objective. Now, how do we plan to do it? What are the principles? What are the economic principles we want to follow if indeed we want the economy to grow in that non-inflationary sustainable way? Well, we spoke at length during our budget speech. Honorable Finance Minister spoke at length about this. Honorable Prime Minister has spoken, and many of you alluded to it as well, which is the first and very important principle that we are following is the principle of cooperative and fiscal federalism. I will get into that in detail because many of you have questions about it. But fiscal federalism, cooperative federalism is the first important principle that we are following, and we've demonstrated that. Secondly, and we've said this before, we have said that we believe in empowerment, not in entitlement. And what that really means is कि हम लोगों को साधन देना चाहते हैं. लोगों को साधन देना चाहते हैं, खोखले अधिकार नहीं देना चाहते. क्योंकि अगर हम उनको साधन देंगे, उनको रोजगार देंगे, उन्हें स्किल्स देंगे, तो वो अपनी ज़िंदगी को खुद अपने आप बेहतर बना सकते हैं. और अगर हमें वो साधन देने हैं तो ज़रूर हमें उनको शिक्षा भी देनी है, हमें स्वास्थ्य भी देना है. तो we have an empowerment view, not an entitlement view of the world. That's a second very important principle. The third very important principle, which Honorable Finance Minister has spoken about as well, is that we are pro-market, pro-business, we are pro-market, pro-business, and we are pro-poor at the same time. हमारी सरकार गरीबों की सरकार है, गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है, किसानों को समर्पित सरकार है. और अगर आप लोगों को इसमें गलतफहमी है कि कोई कई दिनों के बाद आकर इस विषय पे बोलने लगे हैं, अगर आप लोगों को गलतफहमी है कि हम लोग
Okay, please.
किसी के अर्जिंग पे
No,
या
please.
किसी के होने के कारण हम लोग ये बोल रहे हैं, मैं आप लोगों को याद दिलाना चाहता हूं कि 20 मई को जब माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी आकर पार्लियामेंट्री पार्टी के नेता बने, तो उन्हें उस समय जो उन्होंने भाषण दिया, और वो बहुत ही एक ऐतिहासिक भाषण होगा, बहुत शानदार भाषण था, तब उन्होंने कहा कि ये सरकार अगर सरकार है तो गरीबों की सरकार है और ये सरकार गरीबों को समर्पित है। तो ये मत समझिए कि कोई ये नई सोच है, ये हमारी सोच जनसंघ के जमाने से है। और अगर हम लोग इस विचारधारा से जुड़े हुए हैं, क्योंकि हम इसमें विश्वास करते हैं, इसे भरोसा करते हैं, इसे किसी की कोई जरूरत नहीं है कि हमें ये सिखाए।
सर्टिफिकेट देने की जरूरत। बहुत अच्छा, बहुत बढ़िया।
और इसके साथ साथ माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी कई बार कहा है कि हमारी सरकार जो है, इट बिलीव्स इन मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट मैक्सिमम गवर्नेंस, मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट maximum governance, a policy driven state without discretion and the kind of corruption that we have seen. And we believe in governance and transparency, and we don't need anybody to read out to us what governance and transparency means, because everything we have done, whether it is the coal auctions, whether it is the spectrum auctions, whether it's the manner in which we have appointed people, demonstrates that governance and transparency, because it is a core principle that we abide by. This is our economic philosophy. I explained what our objectives are: to build productive capacity, and happy to explain it in more detail if anyone wants more information on it. And these are the principles, as Honorable Finance Minister and Honorable Prime Minister have spoken about many times, that we live by, and that is reflected in our policies. And now I will come to the third part of the puzzle, which is what are our policies. Now in this budget, and Deputy Chairman sir know that I spent many years as a management consultant. And one of the things management consultants are quite good at, sir, is benchmarking. So we spend a lot of time looking at other countries, other companies, and yes, I spend a lot of time looking at other budgets too. I have a legacy with budgets. I've spent a lot of time looking at budgets, starting with 1990, when my father presented a budget that never saw the light of day. So I have been following budgets for a very long time, more than 24 years. And I'm very glad that the Honorable Prime Minister is here, because I have studied his 1991 budget very closely. I meant the former Prime Minister. I have studied his budget very closely, and in fact for this budget, because Honorable Finance Minister and I wanted to make sure as we put this budget together that it reflected the best thinking of the last many years. I actually sat down and I read all 24 budget speeches after the liberalization budget of 1991. I read all of them because I'm a consultant and I needed to benchmark ourselves. And understand, what does a good budget mean? There were high expectations of this budget. And so I wanted to understand, what does a good budget mean? Now this is obviously subjective. I'm not claiming by any means that this is something that is truly objective. But as I went through and I read all of these budgets, and I particularly pulled out 4 or 5 of those budgets, and I'm proud to say I thought 2 of those were my father's budgets of 2000 and 2001, what I realized was that the best budgets had somewhere between 8 to 12 big-ticket reform measures. 8 to 12 big-ticket reform measures. Now, as I said, this is subjective, and some members may not agree, Deputy Chairman, sir, but by my count, and I've discussed this with many outside experts, by my count, the budget that we have presented, and I have it here and I'd be happy to share it with anyone who's interested, and I will not go into it in detail, has 20 big-ticket, high-impact, big-buoyant reform measures. I'll give you just a few. Cooperative federalism and the commitment to a GST date of April 1, 2016. Reduction in corporate tax rates and removal of exemptions, saying we're going to go 30 to 25%. Abolition of the wealth tax. Curbing the black economy through 2 new bills focused on foreign and domestic black money. Monetary policy focused on an explicit inflation objective. A massive increase in how we are thinking about irrigation, which of course is very important for agricultural distress, and I'll come to. Subsidy reform through the JAM trinity that we've spoken about. A massive increase in public investment in infrastructure, railways, roads, the National Investment in Infrastructure Fund, Universal Social Security, which we'll be launching on May 9th, the National Skills Mission, the Make in India program, which means focus on skills and removing inverted duty structures, banking reform through the Bank Bureau, and this is something we can spend hours discussing what we're trying to do there. things that we're doing to strengthen the capital markets, providing pass-through through the alternative investment funds, and the elimination of permanent establishment. A major boost for innovation and entrepreneurship through the Atal Innovation Mission. New thinking on disinvestment. The Mudra Bank for MSMEs. A world-class bankruptcy code to be introduced. The Public Contracts Resolution of Disputes Bill which has been proposed. And finally, and very importantly, and this is again spoken about by several, gold monetization scheme and the sovereign gold fund. These are 20 big-ticket reform measures. Happy to circulate them to any one of you and to spend more time. So these are, these I said the third part of the puzzle is policies. As I said, I'm standing between you and dinner. I won't take up too much time. I'm not going to go into these policies. What I will instead try to do is to take up some of the issues you brought up very quickly. And one of the issues that you brought up, of course, is the devolution to the states. And whether at the end of the day, net, as we say, have the states actually benefited or not in terms of the money that they've got. And if they have got that money, what has happened to social sector programs? I'll address both of those very quickly. First of all, as Honorable Finance Minister said when he spoke in the Lok Sabha, the fact is that after taking into account the devolution to the states, the reduction in central assistance to the state plan, we still find after we've run the numbers, and Honorable Mr. Jairam Ramesh spoke about this. I'm not sure where he got his numbers from, but these are the numbers that we have there on record. This makes the states a net gainer of rupees 1.35 lakh crore, or nearly 1% of the GDP, after taking everything into account. This is the amount of money that has gone to the states in an unconstrained way, 1% of GDP.
Finance Commission.
This is on record in the budget.
These are not my numbers. These are numbers given by the chairman of the 14th Finance Commission.
I don't know where Mr. Reddy got his numbers from. I'm just giving you I'm giving you the authentic numbers straight from the budget.
States where the total volume of funding has actually come down. Well, I would request you to please have a look at this. That's all.
Can I just seek to intervene? When 32% becomes 42% for every state, and obviously with the growth rates moving up year after year, the tax buoyancy goes up. Every year the collections are more, and therefore the divisible pool also becomes larger. So of a larger divisible pool, if 10% increase is there, arithmetically nobody can go down. The divisible pool is larger. Jairam, please, let me just clarify.
Everybody agreed.
Please,
the total volume is coming down.
No, it doesn't. When 32 becomes 42, and it is 42 of a larger base, numerically everybody goes up. When some of the schemes are shifted to the states, that is 8 schemes, some are retained entirely by the center, and some are partly by the center and partly by the state. 1,88,000 crores approximately is what the states gain by 32 becoming 42. There is about approximately a little less than 60,000 which goes down because of this CCS, and the net gain to the states is 1,35,000 crores. And there is not a single state. I have the figures of each one of those states. I am too willing to share it with you. There is not a single state which is not going to get more, because logically, arithmetically, if instead of 32 they get 42, and 42 is of a larger base, everybody has to increase.
Just one clarification, sir. Fine. Let me also ask the Honorable Finance Minister. 32 becomes 42. That's true. And there's also, when central loans and grants to states, there is another 4% increase. That is 10 plus 4, 14%. This is the Finance Commission recommendations. But at the same time, there's the other side of the coin. The 42% was the total central assistance to the states. If the cut is there, they're 10 plus 4, you're saying 32 becoming 42, then that 42 has become 28. The central assistance to states, as well as the central assistance to states and the plan outlays. If you look at both the numbers, it's 14 and 14, 1,33,000 crores. Central assistance to state has been cut. Those are the committed funds. And 1,09,000. Yes, you look at, these are your numbers, 2,42,000 crores. I want you to, please tell me, have you lost 1 rupee? Larger the divisive pool, I understand. Have you lost? Of course you have not.
Anand Sharma ji, of course I have lost it because the size of this year's budget, because of the 10% cut, is smaller than last year's budget. Obviously I have lost it. So when instead of 68%, the centre has only 58%, obviously the money in the centre's pocket is going to be less.
No, but let me answer that question.
Okay.
Let me answer that question. Now, I think the numbers, as Honourable Finance Minister is saying, are absolutely clear.
To be as brief as possible.
Honourable members brought up some numbers. We don't need to get into numbers. The official numbers are right here. We are happy to share them. As I said, it's on record. If it's on record, sir. If it's on yes, absolutely.
You go by your number.
Read it.
No. You go by your number. That's okay.
So,
Read it.
I think the numbers are very clear. The numbers are very clear. The numbers are that the states are gaining by 1% of GDP.
No, we need not fight over.
And the ministries are next.
See.
You have been a minister, a very senior member.
I think we need not fight over the numbers. Government will go by its number.
First timer in such a effective, articulate manner is presenting the case.
No, please.
So that we know what the basis of these numbers are.
I think my understanding is there are some states in which the total volume of resources is coming down. I'm happy to be proved wrong. Please make your numbers public. Let us have a discussion on it.
Okay, that's
Why are you running away from it?
So we need not argue
Honourable member is welcome to come any time and inspect the numbers.
Mr. Minister, you go by your numbers. You go by your numbers. If you don't agree with the numbers and if you have evidence that is wrong, there is ways of taking up, not now. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Secret numbers.
That's what I'm saying.
Not secret
so you can take it up later. Now let him go by his number. Yes. Yeah. It is already there.
So let's come to the second part of this whole discussion of devolution to the states, and which comes back to the principle that I mentioned earlier, which is one of federalism. So when we talk about social sector programs, many of which are largely on the state list, then it becomes all the more important that we give the states the resources and the flexibility to be able to implement the programs as they see fit. That is the spirit of our constitution. And if we think that we have to tell the states, I'm sure honourable members from many states here, I can see my friend Derek shaking his head and saying, I know exactly what I need to do in my own state.
Please let me clarify. I made a straight charge to you while I was making my speech. 2 points, please respond to it. I am asking you 2 clarifications, sir. One, there are some issues like on the borders and the BRGF, the backward district. What do you want to say? We are not interested in the backward districts. You handle it. What is your answer to that? And I have a direct question to you on numbers since my friends this side. I am telling you, with all responsibility, for my state, last year, devolution was 61.88 paisa to the rupee. This year it has gone up to 62 paisa to the rupee. I am happy to be proved wrong if you can.
We will of course go through the numbers with honourable member, but with respect to the social programs, as I was saying earlier.
Let me clear, Vivek. 2014-15, 13th Finance Commission, your devolution of tax was 24,595. Yes, sir. This year it is going to be 38,461. So if you are not happy with that, you please spend it on all backward districts, the increased amount.
Sir, this is the only clarification. I am not saying that the money has not gone up. Please understand. But when you're talking about social sector, when you're talking about backward districts, when you're talking about hill, you spend the money as you want.
Sir, I've asked a direct question. Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir.
I will wait for the answer.
Deputy Chairman, sir.
That's okay.
This is the tax devolution. And over and above this, panchayats and municipalities and revenue deficit state, West Bengal, which other states are not getting.
So, Mr. Deputy Chairman, so that is precisely
Okay,
why,
that's all.
Mr.
Now you proceed.
Yeah, that's precisely
Now
why
you
I
don't.
said.
Now
I
you
said,
please don't yield. You proceed.
Okay, that's precisely why I said to really understand the big picture, you have to understand how all the pieces fit together. You can't take one piece and say you have cancelled BRGF and not see the other piece which says, as Honorable Finance Minister said, you got 14,000 crores incrementally. So you have to look at all these different pieces to put the whole puzzle together, and that's what I'm saying. So we are really giving the states, as part of our thinking on fiscal federalism, the opportunity to shape these social programs the way they see fit. And of course, Niti Aayog is now working under the chairmanship of Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, to understand how these new programs are going to be handled between the states and the centers, and we are moving forward on that. Now we come to another point that many honorable members brought up, Bhundar Sahab ji, Ganguly ji, Naresh Agarwal ji and so on, which is around agricultural distress. Now, as far as agricultural distress is concerned, again, we'll try and answer this as quickly as possible because this has been discussed in both houses at length. There's been a very long discussion on this issue. We, I think, have taken very, very proactive steps around it. Honorable Prime Minister said that we will now provide relief only when 1/3 of the crop is damaged, not half as it used to be. He's already said that. He's going to provide higher relief. We are moving very quickly. Our teams have been out there. Many of our honorable cabinet ministers have been out in the field inspecting all of that, and we are trying to bring relief as quickly as possible. And even as we're trying to bring relief right now, because of these freak weather events, which we all recognize because of global climate change, are going to happen with higher frequency, we are also looking at a number of important long-term measures, many of which are reflected in the budget, to be able to strengthen our agriculture and our farmers. Among them are the fact that, as Honorable Prime Minister said, we are going to put in place the soil health card, which will give us an opportunity to understand which crops are best suited to those conditions. We are really expanding and strengthening the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana because we recognize हमें मालूम है कि अगर आज एक फसल आप काट रहे हैं, अगर आप एक फसल काट रहे हैं आज के समय क्योंकि आपके पास सिंचाई नहीं है, तो जब आप सिंचाई आपके खेत पे पहुंचेगी तो आप एक नहीं, आप 3 फसल काट पाएंगे। और जब आप 3 फसल काटते हैं, और मैं खुद झारखंड से आता हूं, आप लोगों को मालूम है कि मैं वहां का जनप्रतिनिधि हूं, और जब वहां अकाल आता है तो हमें सब लोगों को मालूम है कि कितनी पीड़ा होती है, कितनी दयनीय हालत होती है। तो इसलिए हम लोगों को प्रधानमंत्री कृषि सिंचाई योजना के द्वारा, उस माध्यम से हम लोगों को साधन देना होगा कि वो एक नहीं, वो 3 फसल काटें, और वो फसल चाहे गेहूं की हो या धान की हो या सब्जी की हो, वो सिंचाई के माध्यम से जरूर हो चुकेगी। और साथ हम लोग इनोवेटिव एक नेशनल, माननीय गृह मंत्री जी ने कहा है कि हम लोग एक इनोवेटिव नेशनल क्रॉप इंश्योरेंस स्कीम लाएंगे। एग्रो प्रोसेसिंग पे हम लोग ध्यान दे रहे हैं, एनिमल हस्बेंड्री पे ध्यान दे रहे हैं, प्रोटेक्टेड एग्रीकल्चर पे ध्यान दे रहे हैं। सो एज फार एज एग्रीकल्चर इज कंसर्न, we are looking at a very comprehensive set of measures क्योंकि कृषि प्रधान देश है, we all understand what we have to do to protect our farmers. We are working on that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the sugar industry because that was a question that came up. Honorable members asked about the sugar industry. Now, as far as the sugar industry is concerned, I will reiterate what has already been said in the Lok Sabha. The customs duty on raw and refined white sugar has been increased from 25% to 40%. Excise duty on ethanol for blending with petrol is being exempted, and notification in this regard will be issued soon for the sugar season of 2015-16. So we are hopeful with these steps the sugar industry will improve. There's also a question about the treatment of cane price paid by cooperative sugar mills under the IT Act. That was a question that was brought up, and we tried to be as responsive as possible to understand that. We would like to clarify the following, which is that the reference to government in the official amendment to the finance bill includes both central and state governments. The cane prices fixed or approved by the government, central or state, will be treated as an allowable expenditure. And if there are any other pending issues associated with this, we are free to. We will consider your suggestion on that. We will consider your suggestion on that. Now, moving on from agriculture, recognizing that time is short, let me get to the issue of taxes. So you want to say anything? Let's talk about taxes.
No, please. Bhupendra, let him finish. No. No, he cannot.
I'm not
let
yielding.
him reply.
I am not yielding.
No, no, he's not yielding. Sit down.
I'm not yielding.
Not
Again, when
yielding.
we
Please
look
proceed.
at taxes, we have to again not look at one tax or the other in isolation. We have to look at the entire tax picture.
Yeah.
And if you look at the entire tax picture, if you look at what is happening with indirect taxes in the GST bill, you will see already that those are revolutionary and radical changes that are happening there. And those, of course, we will discuss as part of the GST bill. So we are really trying to streamline and simplify. A lot of people asked about tax simplification, certainly on the indirect side with the GST bill that is happening. Similarly, on the corporate side, what we're trying to do by reducing the corporate tax rate from 30 to 25% is to actually take those, many of those exemptions that have become very, very difficult to deal with, result in a lot of litigation, simplify those, while at the same time bringing down the tax code overall. Today, as you well know, the effective corporate tax rate is actually 23%. Even though on the books the tax rate is much higher than that, the reality is because of all these exemptions, many of which have resulted in litigation and a whole host of disputes, we will be able to simplify all of that, and we will improve the simplification and the streamlining of taxes through the GST bill and what we're trying to do with corporate taxes. In addition to that, please recognize all those of you that wanted tax simplification, the fact, as I had said earlier, that we have abolished the wealth tax. We have abolished the wealth tax, which was also a big compliance burden, and that I think is also going to result in tax streamlining. And Honorable Finance Minister said when it comes to the income tax return, we are looking to streamline it, and we are trying to make sure that the burden that we create to the average taxpayer is very, very modest when it comes to filing your taxes. But we all recognize at the end of the day, it's a vital national importance that we increase the tax to GDP ratio from where it is right now, which is 10% of GDP, which is just not possible for us to continue and run a 21st century state and provide the social programs an Honorable Leader of the Opposition wants without having a higher tax to GDP. So we absolutely have to increase the tax net. That's a very important priority for us as far as taxes are concerned. There was a question about the treatment of government grants and subsidies as income. And that is only in respect of business income. It is done to align with the income computation and disclosure standards, which were notified after wide stakeholder consultation. At the draft stage, this ICDS was also placed in the public domain. It is to be noted that this will not affect the LPG subsidy and other welfare subsidies given by the government to individuals. So let there be no doubt about that. That is an important clarification that some members had requested. Now, I will speak at the end about two matters very quickly. One is on black money, and I'll speak about it very briefly because I think that will again be discussed when the black money bill comes up. And I will speak briefly about the question about RBI and the Public Debt Management Agency and the regulation of government securities. Those were also two issues that many people brought up. As far as black money is concerned, we all recognize that this is a very damaging and pernicious aspect of our economy. There are very wide estimates as to how important that is. But we all note that with only 10% of GDP as our tax collection, we have to do much more to be able to squeeze, as the Honorable Finance Minister said, squeeze the amount of black money, the cash economy, and bring it into the tax net and make it digital to the extent as possible, cashless to the extent possible. So all the measures that we are taking, whether it is the PAN card for the 1 lakh rupees, whether it is the black money bill, it is to be able to bring this part of the economy, which is very damaging, corrodes our institutions, corrodes our values, to be able to bring that in. And that is really why we are doing this. Now, as far as the PAN card for the 1 lakh rupees is concerned, we think that it is possible, in fact, to do it in a way that is administratively simple. There are many people that don't have PAN cards. We recognize that. We're going to try and make it as easy as possible to be able to get the PAN cards. If we can sign up everybody with Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, you can be sure we can sign up people for PAN cards also. We think it's important. I'm sure honorable members, Deputy Chairman sir, will agree with me that we have to tackle black money. I will now come to the final point and conclude with this, which is the question about our relationship with the Reserve Bank of India. On this, we have spoken many times. Honorable Finance Minister, Honorable Prime Minister have spoken about it many times. The RBI, along with many of our other important institutions like SEBI, IRDA, PFRDA, is a very important regulatory institution for the functioning of our economy and our markets. We have the utmost of respect for the professionalism and the approach that the RBI and our other regulatory institutions take. It is very important, vitally important for our business people and our investors to know that the central bank is independent, it's professionally managed, it has world-class talent, of which of course it does right now, and we have maintained that over and over again. And it is in that spirit and with those kinds of consultations that we have in fact brought forward both the idea of the Public Debt Management Agency and thinking about how the bond market should be regulated in consultation with the RBI, as has been moved in the finance bill. We would like to establish a roadmap for the Public Debt Management Agency so that it is done responsibly. All the issues of implementation, how should the states be funded as far as their borrowings are concerned, how should the center be funded, where are the skills and capabilities to do that, all of that is going to be considered as part of this roadmap. And as far as the regulation of government securities is concerned, that is staying as it is. So I want to reassure all honorable members and everyone else that is the way we are thinking about it, and I'm sure that will give confidence and comfort to all those that invest and are stakeholders in this economy. With that, Deputy Chairman, sir, I will conclude. Thank you very much.